Welcome to MedEvidence, where we help you navigate the truth behind medical research with unbiased, evidence-proven facts, powered by Encore Research Group and hosted by cardiologist and top medical researcher, Dr. Michael Koren.
We're spending time with Dr. Michael Koren, of course, with Encore Docs, and he also heads up a team that's responsible for a great website, MedEvidence.com. That's MedEvidence.com, a great place to go to get just good, accurate information that's not particularly biased, right, Dr. Koren? It's just information.
We like to call it the truth behind the data. And thanks, Kevin, for helping us explore how to get the most out of the MedEvidence platform. It's been a valuable conversation so far. Maybe you can summarize it for people who just are starting with this podcast.
All right. Yeah, we've been talking about how the website will help you deal with issues like trying to determine risk versus benefits. The importance of who you are in terms of your genetic makeup, what your background is, what your socioeconomic status is. All these filters matter when you're looking at health related information to try to figure out how it applies to you or your loved ones. And we also thought we would talk in this segment about value and convenience, because when we see options out there for all the many supplements, especially, and other things we can do for our health, most people have a budget, right, Dr. Koren? They have to determine what is of true value for them and their loved ones.
Exactly. Yeah, and that was a great summary. So again, the three tiers, just to reiterate it for the audience, is first think in terms of risk versus benefit, not just good or bad. Everything could be good or bad depending on circumstances. Then know who you are and how that's relevant for the medical decision making. And now to the third tier, which is what's the value to you? The value in terms of dollars, the value in terms of time, the value in terms of other options. So with all these things, sometimes the easiest way to illustrate the point is through an example. And this happens every day in my practice. So literally, clinic yesterday, I talked to a patient. He's like many other patients, some guy in his 70s. He's on probably about 14 supplements. And I ask him, like, why are you taking these things? And typically the answer is, well, someone told me it was good. Okay, well, we can break it down and say, well, there's always a risk versus benefit. And in this particular case, let's talk about zinc. That was one of the things that he was on. And I asked him, why are you taking zinc? And he didn't really have an answer. Well, there's actually studies that have looked at zinc. So in terms of the risk versus benefits, just a quick overview. I can talk about zinc for an hour, but in 1 minute, what I would say is that everybody needs zinc. Zinc is very critical to many biochemical processes in your body, but you can also get zinc toxicity. So a typical element of zinc toxicity is something called ataxia, where you lose your balance or your muscle function is a little bit off. And that's well known to occur for people that overdo it with zinc. The other thing is that zinc interacts with other important elements that your body also needs. So when you take zinc, it's more difficult to absorb iron in copper. So that is a consideration. So if you're anemic and you're taking iron supplements, well, maybe you shouldn't be taking zinc because that can affect the absorption of iron and copper. So all these things get into that element of kind of who you are. And then we get into sort of the value proposition. Well, zinc actually has some data showing that it's effective for people with macular degeneration. And so that's an eye condition of the elderly. And I think a lot of ophthalmologists recommend zinc supplements for patients that fall into that category. So if this fellow who I spoke with yesterday had mentioned that his eye doctor recommended it, I would say, okay, that's cool. That makes sense. You have a reason for taking it. Another area where zinc has had some benefits is in trying to reduce the symptoms of viral illnesses. So there have been a number of studies that have looked at using zinc immediately after developing some symptoms of an upper respiratory infection. And typically that's going to be a liquid zinc or the zinc lozenge that can absorb in your mouth. And there may be some ways that those products reduce the severity of the illness, and studies have borne that out. So the truth behind the data is under those circumstances that helps. But there are no data to say that if you take one zinc pill every day that you can prevent disease. And in fact, there's some studies that show that in fact doesn't happen. So again, context and the use of it is important. And then you get into value. Well, if you're taking one zinc tablet every day to prevent viral diseases, well, you're probably making your urine very expensive by taking all these nutrients that are not needed. The other thing is that if you're somebody that likes breakfast cereal in the morning, well, take a look at the zinc content of that, and you'll find that most breakfast cereals are actually fortified with lots of different nutrients, including zinc. So do you really need that 50 milligram zinc pill if you're getting a bunch of zinc in your multivitamin and your breakfast cereal? Well, the answer is no. So in terms of value, there's pretty much no value to that. Then the other thing that comes up is that there's a lot of different preparations for all these products that are marketed and sometimes very expensive depending on the marketing. And there's a ton of examples of that. So when you look at value, you might see something that says chelated zinc. Well, what does that mean? Well, what it really means is that the zinc is attached to something that makes it easier for your body to absorb. So the question is, well, how easy is zinc for the body to absorb? And the answer is your body does a pretty good job of absorbing zinc. In fact, if you look at a run-of-the-mill zinc oxide, your body's going to absorb 50 or 60% of that. So if the chelated product costs 2 or 3 times more and brings it up to 70%, is that really worth it? I would say probably not. So again, the devil is in the details, which we'll get into the next section. But here's an example of we all have to make consumer choices, and you pay $20 or $5 for the same basic preparation. Now, the flip side is that there are certain nutrients, for example, magnesium, that your body doesn't absorb very well. And as a cardiologist, I'm really focused on magnesium because magnesium is extremely important for a number of cardiovascular functions, including prevention of arrhythmias, extra heartbeats. So some people will be on magnesium supplements, and maybe we're not getting their magnesium levels to where they need to be. And that person may need to consider a different salt than magnesium oxide, which is a commonly used salt that's inexpensive, but may not be absorbed as well as some of the other magnesium salts that are available in the market.
And Dr. Koren, I would think that
so
there's also an issue as well with when the gentleman, your patient, was taking 10 or 14, however many supplements it was, how those might interact with other prescription medications.
Oh, absolutely. It's a really important factor. So there's many examples of how one can impact another. And that's why with pharmaceuticals, you're going to get information about, do you take it on an empty stomach or do you take it on a full stomach? Do you take it at the same time as other things? A great example of that would be you shouldn't take Viagra and nitroglycerin preparations at the same time because of a drug-drug interaction. And those things also happen between supplements. I mentioned already that zinc affects the absorption of iron and copper. And again, depending upon the medication we're talking about, nutritional supplements can actually affect the absorption of multiple different medicines. And again, you have to get into the details and talk to your doctor about it, or look up those specific elements online, which can be readily available for patients.
Value and convenience, one of the aspects that you will appreciate more when you look at the website, MedEvidence.com. That's MedEvidence.com. And that website, Dr. Koren, designed to be, easy for laymen like myself, right?
It is. And we will drill into different issues. So another example of value and convenience, for example, would be fish oils. And we've done programs on fish oils, and there are a ton of fish oil products out there, and there are also drugs that are omega-3 fatty acids. So one of them that's on the market that's been approved by the FDA and proven in clinical trials that we participated in is a drug called Vasepa. The generic name for it is called icosapent ethyl. And it's a specific type of omega-3 fatty acid called an EPA, an eicosapentaenoic acid. And it's been shown in studies that probably that does better than just a generic fish oil product. But then again, if you have your doctor write for that, you may find that you get a bill for $500 a month. And that's no fun.
Right.
So the question is it worth the $500 a month? Well, in some people, it may be worth it. If you have super high coronary artery risk and you've had multiple complications and you happen to have high triglycerides, this may be something that's well worth that $500 a month. But there are alternatives. So there can be fish oils that are specifically prepared to have high levels of that EPA omega-3 fatty acid. There are also some generic versions of icosapent ethyl that may have not been approved by the FDA, like Vasepa, but may have some value if you can't afford the $500. And of course, the part of the value and part of what we do on MedEvidence is help people understand when is it really important for you and your doctor to go after your insurance company and see if you can get that Vasepa paid for, and when maybe you just go with a generic alternative. So these are kind of questions that we address. The other thing, in terms of convenience, we do a lot of clinical research on convenience. So, for example, in the cholesterol space, there's a drug that we helped develop called inclisiran. And inclisiran is a drug that you give 3 times the first year, and then after that, you just get it every 6 months. It helps control your cholesterol. Well, that's pretty darn convenient.
Instead of taking a pill every night.
Is it? Yeah. Well, but it may not replace taking a pill every night, and that's the funny thing. So we still recommend that you take statins. So on one hand, it has this amazing property of being administered only once every 6 months. On the other hand, it may not stop you from taking a pill every night. So how do you balance those things? Well, that's why we have MedEvidence. So we'll have discussions about omega-3 fatty acids. We'll talk about them for cardiovascular disease, for psychiatric disease, and for a number of other indications, and break down all the information with somebody who's a physician that has a really good understanding of the evidence, but also understands the human elements of risk versus benefit, who you are, and ultimately value and convenience. And we'll break those down for you on our MedEvidence platform.
Well, it all starts by looking at the website, MedEvidence.com. That's MedEvidence.com.
And thank you very much for your interest, Kevin. And in our next session, we're going to get into the devil in the details, which is the dose.
Thanks for joining the MedEvidence podcast. To learn more, head over to MedEvidence.com or subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast platform.